public that's here.
Hi, public.
Everybody should have 3 sheets here, right here. There's one which has the agenda on it, and there's another one that is the minutes of what we did at the previous meeting that was on March 27th. And there's another sheet which shows, it addresses the issue of civics education. I thought today, looking at our agenda, that we have a number of issues on our plate here. We specifically have the ED 306 rules, which we've been looking at, and I'd like to have a discussion on those as well. Then we also have on number 5 on that agenda, civics education, and I put that on there seeing that it has been approved in HB2 now, the $1 million to develop a textbook on civics education K through 12. And I wanted folks to know exactly where the statutory language that we have in place right now in New Hampshire law came from. And it came from the state of Ohio. And I have the civics education format and formula, everything they have in Ohio, and it parallels exactly what we put in the statute here, and I'll explain all that. Mental health is another issue which I think is a very important issue in the state right now. And we're looking at input from our school districts that it seems to be a topic that's explosive, that we have a number of students which are displaying health issues. And we have 3 bills which we have retained in House Education regarding that topic. Whether the concern that I'd like to talk about today on that one is, where do we place that? Do we place it if we do something with it in 193E under adequacy or under studies or as a part of health and wellness? That's a conversation which we might be able to get some sense of direction on. Then I have under 7 other, and I'd like to do right now is, does everybody know everybody up here at the table? Yeah, you're good with that. All right, so I'd like to approve the agenda, and at this time, if there's something else that people would like to put on this, let's get it on, added to it, the agenda. There's a lot here. Not seeing anything else being added?
Looks like it's adequate.
Okay, great. Then is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by the Senator Ward and a second by Representative Cordelli. Now, we have the minutes from the previous meeting, and we had nobody taking minutes, so I wrote some minutes up briefly on that. I think we ought to look at that, and maybe if somebody wants to take minutes, they're welcome to do so, or we continue to do it this way. You haven't had a chance to read any of that. I think everybody should take a moment or two to read them over, see if it's reflective or see if it really states some of what we discussed. There's summary notes. Are there any comments here?
I'm okay with the minutes.
Anything to my right?
No, I think just reflective of motion to approve.
You're making
No.
Okay, Representative Cordelli made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, so we can put the minutes aside. and get into the order in which we want to address some of the issues in front of us here today. The first one I noted on the docket for today is ED 306, Preliminary Minimum Standards for Public School Approval. And as you'll note on the bottom of the agenda, there are the dates for the hearings that Fred Bramante is presenting regarding ED 306 to locales. I guess the first thing I'd like to ask, is there anybody that has attended? I plan on doing the last one in Concord. But is there any feedback? Yes, Representative Leno.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Rick. Mel and I actually attended one several weeks ago over at Bow High School, and we were a little surprised about how the presentation went. You know, we know Fred Bramante pretty well, and I know he's certainly committed to strong student outcomes for New Hampshire public school students. But he didn't really spend much time talking about the proposed changes, nor what the effects would be in terms of outcome. He talked a lot about background, and maybe this committee could provide Mr. Bramante with some feedback. Only as you know, it looks like that there's the next meeting coming up is scheduled for June 27th, and then it goes into September. And I think he was going to have like 20 or so of these forums, but you know, and I'm not trying to be critical in a negative way, but in a way that I think would be helpful in terms of disseminating information that's material to the proposed changes, so that Fred can get the critical feedback he's looking for from from people who attend these sessions.
Was there a lot of good input coming in, or was there not good input coming in?
There, in my perspective, is it lacked any sort of detail on what the proposed changes were, and it sort of spent more time on the background that led to the changes, or leading to the proposed changes, as opposed to what the proposed changes are. And he did get some feedback that from some members in the audience, that some people in the audience, that sort of suggested, hey, a little bit more detail on what the proposed changes are would be helpful.
Was there any discussion regarding some of those changes in terminology of competencies versus proficiency and mastery?
No, or expectations.
Yeah.
There wasn't that type of discussion, and Mel and I have had conversations with Fred one-on-one on that. Mel, maybe you want.
Yeah, I followed up on that conversation. I had a conversation with Fred following the Bow meeting, and gave him some suggestions on being a little more substantive. I mean, Fred wants to hear from people. There's no question that's his intent. But there was no opportunity really to provide the kind of feedback that I thought he was really looking for. And I gave him several suggestions on how to open up the sessions. Now, subsequent to that, we've gotten feedback from some of our committee members that went to the one in Kearsarge. And also there was one in Keene that followed the Bow meeting. And my feedback at the beginning is that it's basic. He hasn't changed much of his presentation, which is unfortunate, because I think this is his goal is to get feedback. But I don't believe, from what I'm gathering, he's not getting a lot of feedback because of how he's presenting it. And I wish that he would be a little more definitive on laying out what the changes are, and then getting feedback from what he's saying to people. I don't believe that's coming. I know, Patty, you were...
I went to the one June 5th at Memorial, and it was almost 45 minutes of a PowerPoint of why the history of this going back to 1995, the things that came out in 2007, what our competencies are as opposed to just getting pass or fail or getting grades. mastery versus proficiency, and then, any questions? And like, nobody in the audience had been told anything about what was in the 306 changes.
So there's no discussion regarding acknowledgement versus mastery?
I had the side-by-side
Yeah.
because we had, and I asked the question about that I was concerned with shells being changed to mays in may provide from shall provide, and my only answer was, it's good to be flexible. So, really, and I know that he did a presentation for the Manchester School Board, who wrote him, I guess, pages of their concerns and suggestions, and he did acknowledge that, but he also said, it's nice to get suggestions for changes, but, you know, you don't know if they're gonna happen. So.
Were the sessions well attended, or?
We had 25 in both.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean,
About 30 in Manchester.
Okay.
But it was school board members, you know, elected officials, you know, and one person in the audience brought up, this is very nice in the way you explain everything, but if you're just a regular old parent that's not involved in any of this, you don't know what you're talking about. We don't understand what you're talking about at all. So, I mean, this is a presentation of the way it is. It's presented so that people who are involved in education can understand it, but your parent who has kids going to school and that's their involvement with education doesn't understand this.
Was there any reference at all to the, you know, when we have the individual subject areas identified within our rules, be it mathematics, physical education, health, there's also elements underneath which try to define those skills and that knowledge, that study. There's a gap that's been taken out of these rules. Was there any comment regarding that?
Not that I recall.
Huh.
I mean, it would be nice if Fred had the side-by-side, because I think that really, that provides some sense of background to what the change, whether you agree with them or not is irrelevant. The point is, this is what they are. And I think that's why when we got them from the committee standpoint, that was very instructive to begin to look at that. And I just don't, none of that, and I'm concerned because there were, at least at Bo, and I'm assuming at the others, there were members of the committee or whatever they called themselves that created this. There were members of them there, but they didn't seem to be engaged at all in the process. And I was hoping that some of them would be able to give further feedback to Fred about what he needed to do to think about this or whatever, but it doesn't seem that the basic format, at least at this point in time, has really changed that much, because I did do a follow-up on when he went to Keene. He went from Bow to Keene the next night, and to see if he had made any changes in that, and from what I understand, it was basically the same presentation. So I'm concerned that I don't think he's getting what I think he really is, his intent is right.
And Rick,
Yeah.
I think it would also be important to, you know, during these public sessions, for Mr. Bramante to talk about how the flexibility that he's suggesting and that Patty referenced, how that could manifest in terms of different versions of public school, and you know, to be able to meet a flexible minimum standards or be compliant with a flexible minimum standards document, and be able to say, well, in this community, public school could look like this, and in this other community, public school could look like this, and you know, rather than just using the term flexible, I think people have I know I have a better, easier time understanding if you can sort of fit a hypothetical into that and say, well, now I see what this looks like. Now I see what that could look like, and taking people through some of those examples, I think, could be very helpful.
How did this really impact local control? in terms of my district being able to say we're going to have 24 required credits to get out of here, versus 20 here in this one. Are these new standards, proposed draft standards, laying up against that ability? The graduation requirements set by the local, which they have the right to do now, and there's also requirements of the state, which we've identified through rule. Is there that flexibility being taken, or is it, do you know?
Yeah, I don't think that was discussed, but I think that would be a good, that's an example of a hypothetical
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that I think would help members of the public really understand what's being, and would help us too, understand what's being proposed.
Would it help if we invite Fred to this meeting, one of our meetings, and we have more folks here, so we could have I think we're more in tune with rules. We
Sure.
use them every day,
Sure.
just about we're looking at.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Rick. I would definitely giving him time to sort of prepare and understand what our interests are going to be in that meeting, and
And I think identifying what Representative Myler said, lay out the changes.
yeah.
And I think what has he found? I mean, by the time we would have him come here, I would assume sometime in the fall.
Yeah.
What has he found? What's the feedback that he's getting from them? And what are some of the suggested changes that the committee may be looking at as they begin to deal with their final draft going forward to the state
Now,
board?
it's not our requirement we don't approve the minimum standards of public
Right.
school approval. Those are certainly State Board of Education responsibility. But it certainly does impact, there may not be a direct linkage with our academic standards and the subject areas and the criteria and the substance criteria which we have for an adequate education, but there's a linkage. And I remember when we put health and wellness. The wellness came out of the ED 306 and supported our changing it in our opportunity for an adequate education and substantive criteria. That's where we got the word wellness, and we're able to really substantiate it because that's what people are doing. So I think there is a linkage, and I think we have a good position to be requesting him to come and discuss with us. How do you feel about that?
Well,
Sandra?
I didn't even know about these meetings, so I couldn't go to any one of them, although I would have, because quite a few of them are within easy driving distance.
Right.
So I will have to go to the September 12th one.
And I think, Ruth, that's one of the issues. I think he's had a problem in the advertising of these meetings coming forth. I think in most cases, they would have been through a local school newsletter or from the superintendent of the school districts that they're in. But the actual statewide thing, there's not been a lot of hype around, you need to get to see these, and here are the places you can go. So I'm sorry that you just saw these, because they have been out, but they've been not widely known.
Well, the last one should be good because they've received all your input.
We
Well,
would
that's
think.
why I was selecting the
Hopefully,
last
yeah,
one to go to. But the rules, they were last adopted back in 2015. That's when we changed them. And every 10 years.
Yeah.
And so we're rolling in on 2025.
Mhm.
So I think that's what they're trying to prepare for here. When would be a good time for us to try, maybe we're jumping it when we'd have our next meeting, but if Fred's able to come, we ought to try to, and give us some information regarding these changes and what he's getting as feedback from those schools, and side-by-side information. I think that'd be very helpful for us and for him.
Sometime in mid-September or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
If the last one is September 12th.
Yeah, mid-September. yeah.
Then give him time
Yeah.
to,
Or even early October, I mean,
Right,
it's,
I'm not sure when these are, do we know the date that they're supposed to go to the state board?
I think after all of his hearings,
Yeah.
anyway.
Because I think what happens is that, to the state board's credit, when they did receive the initial draft, they basically moved it aside for these hearings to take place before they actually started that 60-day process for the actual before it goes
They
through.
said 180 days.
180 days, right, yeah, so there's time here, it's just, we just wanna make sure by the time they get to the state board that there's been a reflective period of time on the draft.
So then, mid-September, early October, I think we'd be in line to have him
Yeah.
come in and do a presentation for us. Are we all good with that request? Good. Is there any need to stay on the issue of ED 306 at this time? No. Okay. Jumping down to the next one which we have, which is civics education. And I have, on the large packet where there's a 63, that's item 63 within the HB2. And this is the language which appears in law that's underlined, which stipulates that there's going to be the sum of $1 million for fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, which shall not lapse, for the purpose of developing and creating a New Hampshire civics textbook to be distributed to every New Hampshire civics classroom. So I'm assuming that this will probably get signed into law. I think there's a really good chance, seeing the governor, when in his presentation, has civics as an issue that needs to be addressed. So then what I've done is I've put into this packet of materials information starting, let's see, on like page 3, the results of the NAEP, and I think we're all very familiar with the results of NAEP. This is information which is posted on the DOE website, that the nationwide we did very poorly in terms of civics education, therefore HB2. So that information is available. I don't think there's necessary to get into a lot of that. That's there for your information. So jumping ahead to page 7, now I want to just explain that within statute, and statute is it's stapled to the back side of your agenda. There's a 189:10 says studies. See, that's that part. Let's see. No, that's all regarding the second one. We do have, it's the part that's dealing with, or maybe it's in this packet.
Yeah,
It's in this
Page
packet. It's on page 8. If we go to page 8, that's what I'm looking for. 189:11, Instruction in National and State History and Government. And we have in our statute right now A through J. Those are areas of study dealing with the United States and New Hampshire government civics course. At a minimum, the course shall include instruction in these A through J areas. And this is for information. The first item there, you can see opportunities and responsibilities for civic involvement. If you look at page 10 of this document that I have before you here, this comes out of the plan from the state of Ohio, which adopted their model social studies curriculum in 2019. Senator D'Alessandro and I put these A through, not J, but A through I into statute back around 2017-18, when this was still draft. But this has since been adopted by Ohio. But Ohio has 4 basic strands in their social studies program. It goes out history, government, geography, and economics. Those are the strands. Within the government strand, there is a civic involvement strand. And you can see that the content statement, opportunities for civic engagement within structures of government, are made possible through political and public policy process. And we have opportunities and responsibilities for civic involvement. We modified language a little bit, but they're similar. If you went down to item B, and that's found on on pages 10 through 11. B says skills to effectively participate in civic affairs. That's what this is all about right there. So we took that, political parties, interest groups, and media provide opportunities for civic involvement through various means. That's in the Ohio plan. On it's reflected on 12 and 15. C says the U.S. Constitution and principles stated in the Articles of Amendment of the United States Constitution that provide the foundational democratic government of the United States. That is right there on pages 12, and that we just stole it right directly from Ohio. And same thing for E, where we're supposed to be talking about the structure and function of the three branches comprising federal state governments, legislative, judicial, and executive. If you look at page 16 in the Ohio model, you can see it talks directly about the three branches of government. Another thing we just took from that state. They had put their model together with consultants, with teachers, with people teaching it, and with various associations. It was a task force put together to develop this curriculum that they have. And then going on down to the next one, F, the role, opportunities, and responsibilities of citizens to engage in civic activity. If you go to page 18, you can see that there it says, in the United States, people have the rights to protect them from undue government interference. Rights carry responsibilities to help define how people use the rights and require the respect for the rights of others. And they're talking about engagement. And that's item number 15 in their content statement. So we took that one as well. On G, where it says the role of interactions of state of New Hampshire and local governments within the framework of the United States Constitution. Obviously, we didn't take Ohio's but they do have that on page 1920. We just have written in New Hampshire that we want to be also teaching about civics on the local level and the state level, and which is on H, how federal, state, and local governments address problems and issues, making decisions, creating this. And you can see item 20, page 21. They also have that as individuals and organizations play a role within federal, state, and local governments in helping determine public, domestic, and foreign policy. And it speaks to it a little bit down below on item 20 in theirs as well. And also, the last one, I, the role and actions of government in the flow of economic activity and regulation of monetary policy. That came specifically on theirs on page 22. You can see the Federal Reserve System uses monetary tools to regulate the nation's monetary supply and moderate the effects of expansion and contraction in the economy. And they talk about the feds in that system. So we took this. Now, I also took a little bit of time and went through and say, okay, what are they doing in terms of civics education for all the grades? And they have taken, and you can see on page 23, children continue to build on their understanding of chronological timelines and calendars that are introduced in grade 2. This is the grade 1 social studies curriculum which they had in Ohio. And every grade level seems to, they carve out civics within government. And it's something that maybe we ought to be looking at when we're developing a textbook. I know it's not our responsibility to do that. I didn't understand within HB2, where it says the Department of Education, Commission on New Hampshire Civics. Commission on New Hampshire Civics. Who's on that commission? I've never heard of it.
What was the name of that group that came and presented to us together?
That
That was called New Hampshire Civics.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
New Hampshire Civics.
Right.
I don't know if it's a commission.
So that was,
That's a nonprofit.
That's a
yeah, it's a
nonprofit.
nonprofit.
Okay.
So I don't know who's going to be writing this thing. Appropriate to the Department Commission New Hampshire Civics established in RSA 21N8C. I went and looked at it. There is no 28C.
Okay.
unless it's in HB2 somewhere. Some of $1 million. So in writing this thing, I think it's important that, because this is going to impact our responsibility for oversight on this area, which is within an adequate education.
A couple comments, I think. One, the executive director of the New Hampshire Civics has resigned, Martha Madsen, and she's left. They do have an interim acting there, so and that organization primarily deals a lot with social studies teachers, etc. The other thing is that there is an organization that's I've been tangentially in contact with, and that is they're working on civics and civility, which is dealing with the primary election. And again, Mr. Bramante has been the key factor in that, and it's the design of that is to try to do exactly what this is doing, only from a political standpoint as far as the election goes. It's a bipartisan effort to engage students not only in this state, but across the country, actually, to be engaged in the primary election. But there's a whole program that they're developing that's a lot of this content that's here, Rick, that leads up to the primary election, where students from across the region and across the country can get involved in this. And they're moving right along, and they've got sponsors, and they're developing programs, curriculum that would provide engagement of students in this process, that with the culmination of it basically being engaging with candidates that are running for the presidential election. So those are just two things that directly relate to the civic study.
The reason why I bring this topic up, if you look on the agenda, on the back side, there's some statutory language on page 2 of the agenda there. And it's 193E2-A, substantive educational content of an adequate education. Civics is listed under 4. So it's our responsibility. I see these as standards of what we teach, academic standards, subject areas. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but so then somehow, if we're getting down and we're now going to be contracting out somebody to do it, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with other groups getting involved and writing this, but they've always come back for approval. They have to come back for approval by the state board and the state board. But if it comes to academic standards, the Legislative Oversight Committee is responsible for reviewing and recommending. Correct me if I'm wrong in that one.
No, I think that's right out of the statute.
That's right out of statute.
I do have a question though with respect to page 8, part H, which is which you've got reference to the Ohio page 132, which is 21 and page 21 in this packet. I'm not quite sure I'm seeing the direct reference to Ohio's plan as it relates to how federal, state, and local governments address problems and issues by making decisions, creating laws, enforcing regulations, and taking action. Because that's sort of the full.
I'm not trying to say we need to be using Ohio at all.
No,
what
no,
I'm trying
no.
to say, I'm just trying to show that this is the historical background of how we got to where we did.
Right, and
Yeah.
I think having a model from another state is sort of helpful when looking at how you go about defining these various academic standards in a way that doesn't take a partisan slant, because civics can sort of easily fall into that trap. And And H, I think, is particularly interesting because it basically references how the three branches of government operate to address problems and issues by making decisions, executive, creating laws, legislative, enforcing regulations, executive, and taking action. That would be a combination of executive and judicial. And it'd be great if Ohio had something that sort of spoke to
Yeah, see, they talk about those three branches at all levels addressing public policy issues that arise domestic and international. That's on page 20.
21 talks about more of like the public's
Yeah,
ability
yeah,
to engage
yeah.
in government.
Yeah,
At the top of page 21. And
Section
then,
19 there.
19, yes, I'm looking at it.
yeah. And then 20, the bottom of page 21, number 20, seems to be more of a legislative policy.
Explain how the federal government uses.
But not how the
fiscal
government addresses problems
policy. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
and issues.
Mhm.
And
yeah.
And obviously, I think that's a big thing is what we're seeing play out with the news from last week too. And I'm not trying to make it
Yeah.
political here,
Yeah.
but you know, it doesn't help when people get up and say, you know, the weaponization of the Department of Injustice. That doesn't help.
Well, I think we're just going to have to, that's hopefully what we would do with a good civics program, is we would teach people about civics and how to engage and try to get resolution in a meaningful, lasting manner. So I know there's a lot of different civics programs out there, but I'm just wanting to just try to figure out.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I just printed out this as a copy of that commission in the,
Okay,
from the budget, if that would be helpful for you guys.
so that was in HB2?
Yeah,
The commission's in
and it
there?
has like the textbook stuff follows
Well,
it.
everybody needs to have
It's
a
just
copy.
like an excerpt from the front and back of that page. There should be 6 there.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay.
Commission established.
It just hasn't made it into the book yet.
Yeah, right, yeah, yeah. I was looking at one section, HB2, here's another section.
This part right here, on the other side of that.
It's
That's
interesting
the-
that
the commission.
this also talks about the textbook and even a paper copy of the textbook, whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Ward, but there was a lot of discussion about this textbook during the Senate budget hearings.
There
And
was.
there was an amendment put forward by Senator D'Alessandro to cut the $1 million because he didn't think that a textbook was actually required. And I think the other side of that coin that Senator Bradley talked about was that it didn't necessarily have to be a paper textbook, but could be digital, because there were concerns about the cost of doing a hard copy textbook and distributing it to all the schools and everything else. So I think that that's a question that will play out as we go forward in terms of the $1 million and what kind of textbook we are actually looking at producing.
There was a lot of discussion, and I think with it, if you have a digital book, you can go in easily and make the changes, whereas with a printed book, you have to, reprint it and redistribute it. So,
I attended that meeting on that Friday that when finance, that's the one where Senator Gray and Senator Bradley, et
Yes,
cetera, and then Senator D'Alessandro and Cindy were there. I can remember Senator Lou D'Alessandro questioning, okay, if we're going to have a textbook, who's going to print it? You know, all the costs associated with it, who's going to write it, et cetera. And he was advocating for the people that are the social studies teachers, organizations, et cetera, to be contributors to this process. And when it was cut to $1 million, then he said, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to do it for $1 million if we're talking about everybody, the 160,000 kids, for the textbook. And of course, and one textbook's not going to be good for, you know, grade 6 and grade 10 or 11. There's different contents in terms of civics and how you present it and topics, and it has to be a scope and sequence type affair. So I think he was coming from his perspective of being a social studies teacher. And he alluded to the fine folks that he has had in his classes and that he has taught. And he said that he's a textbook person. But I think that when then the commissioner spoke up and said, well, we can do this digitally with $1 million. And trying to, I think, even try to protect the money for it, the whole program. So it's an issue which I think is still up in the air. I know you see a written copy here, but I'm confused on that myself. I've gone through this process. I did it for the state of Maine. And we had a textbook for the civics in the 4th grade, because that was where we taught Maine studies. And we had civics and families, you know, knowing this is how many dollars you have, this is what you can afford to spend, and the kids learn that concept. Then in the middle school, there was not a textbook. There was a teacher's guide with a lot of opportunity for activities which should be pursued, showing the goals and the objectives of the program, and where the resources were available. And then we did the same thing for specific courses within the high school. For the lower grades, there is only a book for grades 2, 3, and 4, and later on at the upper end of the elementary school. So I think that we need to really filter through this and find out just how this is going to be done, and we ought to have some input on that too, because there's nobody on this commission that's from the legislature.
Yeah, there
Yeah, there
two,
are.
two members of the House.
Two members of the House, okay.
And
And
one in the Senate.
yeah.
Yep.
One in the Senate,
J and K.
So, Rick,
yeah.
on the, on what you started talking about on the HB2, page 18 of what Jen just handed out, line 8, for the purpose of creating a New Hampshire civics textbook to be distributed, ... is part of the question here what that means? Could that be interpreted as K-12 curriculum? You know, grade appropriate or
Grade appropriate.
or skill appropriate curriculum that could be, you know, that serves as the curriculum used in all public schools. I don't think there's a hard definition of civics textbook to be distributed in here, so. Because I agree with what Senator Ward was saying and what Representative Cordelli was saying, that you know what you're putting in front of a 4th grader is, you know, potentially quite different from what you're putting in front of a 11th grader.
Yeah, right.
It says to every New Hampshire civics classroom. Does that put a limit on which classrooms get it? It says civics classroom.
Does it mean high school?
What does that mean?
Well, there's a required course in civics.
Yeah.
So is that the one they're talking about?
Does that mean the textbook only goes to that civics classroom?
So the printed copy would be in each classroom, but not necessarily to each child, is how I see this.
Okay.
But I think the intent here was to create an ongoing, really, K-12
Yeah,
program with varying components of it that's age specific. And so, I mean, you know, for example, I remember, I think somebody was talking about like in the lower L grades, the mere fact of doing some collaborative decision making is part of a civics initiative of how do you make decisions, how do you solve problems. That is that's a component. It's not a government issue, but it's a dealing with the civility and how you engage in decision making. So I think I would hope the commission would begin to look at not just a textbook, but what kinds of activities and what kinds of curriculum that's available throughout the spectrum, dependent upon what the age level of the student happens to be. So every year, you're not just dealing with a fourth grade program,
Yeah.
but every year there is something that's going to be engaging the students in some kind of a civics activity.
Well, it says create a textbook and related curriculum.
Exactly right. Related curriculum, I think is what's critical here. And I think the whole issue of online stuff is important too, because in this program, there's a lot of video that's available
Mhm.
that could also be used. That's not printed material, and I'm not downgrading printed material, but with how youth today is so engaged in the video world, it would seem to me that has got to be part of an foundational piece of the program.
Video of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speeches.
Exactly, right, yeah. We have, for example, I was sharing with Martha Madsen, those of us that had worked on the 18-year-old vote, we now have a 55-minute video that basically talks about how those of us that were involved in this thing organized it, lobbied it, and then engaged in the whole voter registration. And I mean, I think she's going to be using that with her social studies groups when they have their annual meeting in the fall.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's that kind of activity I think that's important.
Okay. So I think that the primary thing I try to achieve today, I think I've done that, is that where our current language came from. It came from basically from Ohio. Now, where we go, I guess it's up to that commission.
And I think one of the assessments will be that next time when you get the curriculum going here,
Yep.
you'll be able to see whether or not there's an improvement in the results of the test scores on this.
Well, that goes to the other question I think I had listed there, somewhere in that. There's accountability. Yeah, how to measure improvement and assessment under 5A on the agenda. Is that going to be locally developed, or is that going to be something which is developed by that commission?
So, so I think something that's important to reference on this too is the DOE's news release, which you've got copied on page 3.
Yeah.
And it goes to say that nationwide, average scores declined in U.S. history and civics for 8th graders compared to 2018, with civics scores declining for the first time since the assessment began in 1998. And so this is specific to the 2022 NAEP.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's a lot going on in the 2020, 2021, and 2022 NAEP, you know, because of COVID. And I think would one of the objectives of the commission also be to understand what contributed to the decline in, which clearly bucks the trend that of improved results since the beginning of assessment back in 1998. I mean, was it curriculum? Was it COVID? Was it something else?
Well, it's hard to tell from these NAEP scores here. I'd like to find out what's going on in our own state.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the NAEP score is tracked to the state
Yeah,
too, so we
right,
could
yeah,
see how New Hampshire
yes.
did on this, not
Yeah.
just nationwide averages.
And the state's never really been in the business of an assessment for social studies. We haven't been doing that. That's been relegated to the local. And then we have, well, we're going to assess the performance based upon the immigration test. And of course, there's also within our statute the provision, I don't know if I even put that statute in here, where there's a local competency test for social studies also offered. Let's see, I think I may not have put that, yeah, let's see, wait a minute. Yeah, it says right here on page 9, as a component of instruction under paragraph 1, a locally developed competency assessment of the United States government and civics that includes, but is not limited to. I've never seen any of those results. Is it possible for this group, for us to even find out how we're doing on that locally developed assessment? And what is their developed competency assessment? How that is that being done in schools? Or I don't know if it's being done or not.
Is that local assessment sent on to the department at all?
Yeah,
That's not specified in there, it doesn't look like.
What about that last sentence? On June 30th, each of the school
Yeah,
districts
that's-
shall submit the results?
Yeah, that's just the immigration.
That's the immigration test.
But not local
But
competencies.
we don't know how they're doing on their local competency test for social studies.
But if they take the immigration test, they don't also have to take the other one. is
That's
it?
right.
So they might.
That's true.
So that
Yep.
might skew the results
Right.
too. So either.
So when you talk about local, you talk about local each state, or you talk about each municipality,
Each district, I think.
Each district.
Yep,
each school district?
yep.
See, it says that that local assessment shall be administered to students as part of the required high school course in history and government. Is it possible to find out how students are doing on that locally developed assessment? We gave this authority to these school districts when we said it's no longer a statewide assessment. That was back early on under Ginny Berry.
I have a meeting with Melissa White of the department on Wednesday, so I could ask her about it at that point.
Yeah, whether they are familiar with this or
Right.
any information provided to them. If not, I'd even just like to see what those locally developed assessments look like. I don't need to see the results, I'd just like to see what that'd be good for that commission to have a beat on it. I think accountability is really important. We oftentimes put money into doing something, but we we don't get the results of whether it makes any difference or not.
Mhm.
Is the committee supportive to put a request into the department to see if they can acquire, if they don't have this locally developed assessments, so we can see them, have them available?
No, I wouldn't want it. I'd like to see it.
I would,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, so we will ask that.
Hard time finding the civics.
And I hear you speaking about the NAEP data for civics. Is that broken down by state?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, it must be.
Yeah.
It is for other subjects, I'm not sure
Yeah,
about civics.
but I'm
I
just
would
not
think.
finding it on civics.
Yeah.
I've seen it on the other subjects.
Math and English and everything, yeah.
And looking at the department's, you know, a more, you know, closer read of the department's short news release here, it's referencing nationwide trends, not which, you know,
Mhm.
which aren't necessarily reflective of statewide trends.
I think it'd also be interesting to see if they receive all these reports from the school districts by June 30.
That's pretty close.
We're right there.
That's right.
It's always an issue, isn't it?
Yeah. It's probably just like the, emergency operation plans,
Right, yes.
20% came in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No sense writing this stuff in the loft.
So could we ask the department for the statewide, so if those are available?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Statewide, Nate.
Yeah, or not, I'm sorry, not statewide, by district.
Yeah,
Oh.
ask for the local
Yeah.
tests.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Ask for the state NAEP results.
right.
And ask for, the Citizenship and Immigration Services test.
Yeah.
So there's 3 things we're requesting out of this law.
In as granular, we
Yeah.
should be able to get it right down to we don't need student data, but
Yeah.
we need district data.
Yeah.
And if it can be, the NAEP data on a national basis is also categorized by, what's the term? Disaggregated groups, did I get that right?
Yeah, by
Like different-
subgroups like we do for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and if that's available
Yeah.
by district.
Okay.
Reports from prior biennium. And I'm sort of wondering if the study isn't what students are studying, but what we're studying, how school districts are responding to Roman 2 and Roman 3.
When I had talked with Anthony, now Anthony's no longer with us, he's retired, he said that we haven't really defined what that category 189 versus 193
Correct.
are. Sometimes we're loading up one when we shouldn't be loading up that one, we should be loading the other one up, and really clarify ourselves as to where we want to put these concentrated studies that are within these criteria that are not identified in 193, where should we put those? And he was always suggesting to me, put them in 189, that's where we need to list this stuff, seeing that you have in your rules where mental health is part of your health.
Right, and so you've under 193E, you've got 7, which is health and wellness, and 10, which is personal financial literacy. So those correspond to Roman 2 and Roman 3 of 189.10, and 2 and 3 clearly build out what is meant by health and what is meant by personal financial literacy. So maybe it's a good place to provide greater, detail on what the legislature is looking for, and also to get a report.
Do you know, you're looking at ED 306 rules, because that's where all this stuff that we're looking at here appears in the 300 series. are these areas which specify, like I pointed on the back side of that sheet where it talks about alcohol and drug, injury prevention, nutrition, physical activity, family life, tobacco, mental health, etc. Are those being scratched from the new proposed rules? Is that the gap, elements which are, is the gap that the School Boards Association addressed?
It may be,
Yeah.
you know, among
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things, so.
I think we gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Because if we're losing it here, then we gotta make sure it's somewhere else. And we ought to be putting it underneath where we have all the rest of the health stuff and really load up the health section and do it properly. What's included within health and wellness?
Yeah, so could we ask the department for for maybe the last, I don't know, 3 reports that this section requires?
The department has a whole department of health and wellness
Yeah.
that should have all of this.
Mhm.
And aren't school districts supposed to be doing something with MTSSB, however they want to do it? I know Manchester has 2 directors of MTSSB, but I actually don't even know what they do. But I know they have them. So
Right.
I think there's something going on everywhere, but we just don't know what it is. But I think the department, it's pretty much on top of it, because I've spoken to somebody there before, and she knew everything that was going on in all the different places, and I can't remember, do you know, Jen? I can't remember what her name is.
I don't know who's come in since, the last turnover
Okay.
a couple years ago, and I can't remember her name now either, but I know that she left it maybe 2 years ago or
Oh.
around the pandemic, and there might be a new person there,
I know my not.
who I don't know, yeah.
Okay.
I'd go, Dave, you know, it says at the top, the department shall survey school districts biannually.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go back 10 years.
Oh,
And so we'd get 5 reports. And so you go back prior to
Mhm.
COVID. And so your reports were going, somebody's going to say, oh,
Yeah.
that's just related to COVID. Let's go back as far as we can get reports.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my concern is that I think the interest in this area has been spiked as we've come out of COVID. As we begin to see that there are a lot of students who are still reacting to their isolation during that period of time. I mean, we've done a lot of good work in the state dealing with special ed referrals, et cetera. That is not my interest in this area, because I do think there's a new interest that deals with how are we dealing with students who are struggling, because I mean, we've heard reports of the lack of maturation on the part of some students, that like 8th graders are really behaving at a 6th grade level. And so my concern is what are the support systems in trying to ramp up? I mean, how long, I don't know the answer to this question, how long does it take a student or a young person who has been disengaged from social interactions with students where they would ordinarily have been maturing, didn't during that 2-year period of time? How long does it take, and what does it take to get them up to, I want to say grade level, but up?
Going back at least 10
Give us
years.
an idea, yeah.
That will give us some basic information which is necessary. I'm inclined to believe that, you know, in my discussions with our superintendent, Brian, other health impaired category IEP has grown. Just by observing students, there's a change. I watched the graduation at the elementary school. It was a K through 8, just the other night, and I watched it the previous year too. There was a different feel this year, because I think what's just happening, we're seeing some of that catch up happening and developing. And I do believe that teachers are working real hard to try and get that. to that level. I saw it with their band and choral program. It was really just outstanding. And it was, and of course, you know, as a teacher, every 3 years you get a crop of kids who maybe are not the ones that you think are exemplary.
Right,
And that happens. That's been going on for years. And so I used to have teachers who used to like take that 1 year to go out and get some training on the year that one was coming through. So I agree. I think we need to have mental health as part of and noted somewhere underneath our health and wellness program. But I say it like that, not as a separate program. I think by saying it separately, I think it may get us into some territory we don't want to get into. Is the teacher now responsible for mental health as I perceive it and as I define it versus how you see it, Dave, and how you define it? They may be different.
But clearly it's part of health.
It's clearly part of
I mean,
health.
physical health and mental health
Yeah,
comprise health.
yeah. And
So, yeah.
it's just like within the social studies we talk about, we have geography, you have history, you have government, you have civics. Those are elements within. I guess I'm cautious in saying perhaps we shouldn't try to keep these individual elements as a separate entity in itself, as just trying to do like we did. We still call it social studies, but we have parentheses out beside it. What are those elements within?
Right.
That's what we should be doing, I think, with our health and wellness.
And I think using the word sometimes mental throws everything off, because it's not so much mental health, it's your overall good health. It's part of that. So I think when we say mental health, we immediately think of, you know, identifying kids or them having to go for whatever, and that's not it's not necessarily that. It's just, you know, just good health overall.
Well, health and wellness,
Health
I
and
think
wellness.
describes it pretty well.
But just using those words alone, I don't think does, because I think traditionally we've looked at health as being a physical thing. I mean, when you look at health insurance, it only up until recently has it really started to look at health above the neck, and in many cases it still doesn't include, you know, teeth or eyes or stuff like that. I mean, it's sort of like everything the neck and below was well understood, and we have hospitals and doctors and things, but pretty much from the neck above, you're on your own. At least had been for a long time, and so I think as we understand that mental health is so important to your overall health, including
Well,
physical.
I think the way they had it in 306, or whatever part of this is, 306.40, they have mental health listed as part of the K through 12
Yeah.
program. It's a component of, it's like a chapter within the book. And only it transcends all the chapters. So I think that I'd like to see us hold to the way we've been doing it, but incorporate it into, and even if we feel necessary, I can support it, to even list it underneath the studies where we have health and wellness listed. We can put this component, define it a little bit there, rather than putting it as a new section of inadequate education. I think that's where we're gonna have a lot of reverse on.
Yeah, I think, and I think,
Yeah.
you know, building it out the way you've got it and
Yeah.
the way it is in the 306 is where it does,
Yeah,
you know, specifically call out, maybe, you know, it does specifically mention mental health, but maybe with a little bit more detail behind it, you know, as this hasn't been updated in 10 years.
and you see, we don't have frameworks which are guidance to our school districts anymore. So the rules are the only place people can walk to right now and see some of these elements within those subject areas. If we take it out of 306, there's not gonna be anything.
Right. And something that I think's, you know, directly related to G, and I'm not an expert in this, so I'm this, you know, this is hopefully it's somewhat correct, is there's been a lot of discussion certainly when I was on the school board, but I think we've had discussion around this committee too, in terms of adverse childhood experiences and how that contributes to mental health, and probably having some language in there that, you know, speaks to the importance of understanding what those are, you know, and how that's impacted a student.
Yeah, I know it. I've gone through that with my own grandkids.
Sure.
And sometimes you say, suck it up, but they don't. That's a real hard thing for a kid to do when they're being throttled every day.
Right.
And so I think this is a very important topic. I don't want to, you know, throw it aside. I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to make sure we do it properly.
So when we do talk about this in greater detail, could we get some folks in from maybe Holly Stevens, from NAMI, and maybe even consult with Senator Whitley on
I'd like to get some school psychologists in here and counselors in here too, and a nurse. Ruth, you're a nurse.
yeah.
Not a child, not a pediatric nurse.
Right.
But we can have the person who just got the School Nurse of the Year award.
I think that's important as well.
Well, if there's someone at the department too that's running the,
Yeah,
I'd like,
right.
that's
Yeah.
The wellness
tell us
office.
what's going on, they know what's going on statewide, and she sent me a chart, and actually.
Now, do
years
we
ago
want to do
now.
it here, or do we want to do that in the subcommittee, which we're gonna be putting together? I would, what I try to do is just get some clarification here, and I think I've gotten that, the
Yeah.
direction we ought to take today.
Yeah.
That's given the direction which we can give the subcommittee. Yeah.
We shouldn't be duplicating.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Paying 3 bills dealing with mental health, so we can get a better bead of how to handle it.
306 is changing to say the school board may require,
Yeah.
so they can do it if they want. The proposed changes for 306 changed it, say the school board may require, so they could leave it out if they want to, if it's worded that way.
That'd be on the side by side when Fred comes here.
Yeah.
I think we gotta address all this stuff.
Yeah.
Ruth, you had,
I have a question. We just talked about getting reports on the last 10 years, and you pointed out that there was biennial, so it'd be 5 reports. But then it says here on the 3rd sentence that the report shall be sent to the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives, chairpersons of the Senate and House committees,
That's
which
why I
is
asked if
education and
you had-
education. So, Rick, did you ever get a report on this?
I can't honestly say yea or nay on that. I do get reports. I got the bullying report. I got the suspension expulsion report. See, they oftentimes come in the summertime, and then you walk in, it's on your desk there. And so you oftentimes have to request them again. And so I think that's what we need to do. We need to request them again. Mel, did you ever get them?
Long time ago.
That's a long time ago. That's right, exactly right.
So it's not something that is sent on a regular basis that we all know about.
They do send reports to us. A lot of times they come in during the summer months and it's just left on the desk. And then what happens is that change in leadership, change in party, different chairs. And so that all happens.
So if they were sent, we should be able to get copies of it.
That's right. It should be available. We'll find that out.
That was my question.
Yeah.
It'd be great if we
Find
could
out.
have
And those reports should
a
also
place
go
to
to the
store
site.
these reports.
Pardon me?
The
Like, not a
reports
file cabinet.
that come here should also go to the site.
Yes, yes. We'll direct them, because everybody will get a copy of everything we get coming back to us here. So, is there any further discussion on this topic? That's all we had on the docket for today. So we're gonna adjourn to a time to be announced at some later date?
Yeah.
And we know we'll have something mid-September or October.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay?
All right.
Is there
Good.
anything further? All in favor of adjourning?